Hi, I'm Dana, and I've finally managed to wash my hair for the first time since I moved in. You're gonna have to deal with it being wet. I don't really understand why it's a thing that you're not meant to do anything professional with wet hair. And don't get me wrong, this isn't professional, but I do feel like there's some sort of societal thing that says that I'm not meant to do it. But I don't get why, so I'm doing it anyway. One of my last videos, I'll link it here if you really want to go back and watch it. I started on a list of the traits of my autistic childhood and things that I really think somebody should have picked up on a lot sooner than, me at 19 picking up on it myself. It just ended up being a really long video, and partway through I was having this big realisation of oh, it's all about social imagination. That's how a lot of things played into my childhood play. And it's a whole thing. Go watch the video if you care. But I didn't get to do the last few points because the video had gotten so long and I was this is blowing my mind. So I wanted to do a second part where I talk about some other traits that were very obvious in my childhood, and again, things that I think people should have picked up on, to be honest. The one that I've brought up in a few videos is that as a child, my special interests were incredibly obvious. They were just so clear. I don't know how anybody missed that they were special interests and not just a kid having a hobby or whatever, Because it was very much one of my main, I was teased all the time by my family about how much I enjoyed TV shows and movies, and one of the main bits of teasing was that if we were going to, if we were watching something new on television, if we were watching something new in the cinema, if we were, as a family experiencing some new piece of media together, my family would be like, what do you reckon then? Is this going to be something that we don't get to hear Dana shut up about for the next 10 years? Or is this going to be something she watches and just doesn't give a single shit about? And it was, you never fucking knew, quite frankly. I remember that my family had started watching Charmed, and I was immediately this is the best thing in the whole entire world. And I was printing out the spells and everything to keep in a folder. But then other things that we watched as a family, felt like a chore and I didn't care about in the slightest. And I'll give that it was largely stuff like Emmerdale or Coronation Street, so a kid isn't going to be that invested in it, probably. And there were also quite often discussions of oh well, if there's time travel, if there's some sort of medieval element, then Dana's going to become obsessed with this thing. Because it was I liked Lord of the Rings, I liked The Mummy, I liked Doctor Who. It was very, you could sort of tell which things I was going to latch onto and which things I wasn't going to latch onto. And my parents and my family noticed it as something that was out of the norm and something that other children didn't react like that, but they still just didn't do or say or react to it in any way. And one of the other things that they if they're vaguely supporting it in the way that my parents supported anything about me, then they were obviously aware of it. And one of the other big things was how many collections I had that I absolutely adored my collections. I had my VHS collection, my China doll collection, a collection of little porcelain teddy bears. I really especially enjoyed the ones that were for some sort of event, a graduation bear, a birthday bear, a Christmas bear, things like that. I did try having a snow globe collection at one point, but they just kept getting broken. I didn't fucking know why, and then I'd get screamed at for breaking them, and I was I didn't even touch it. But it was, my main collections were the bears, the China dolls, and my VHS collection, and they were things where my parents very, very, very rarely shop new, and any charity shop we went into would normally have one of those things, and I would beg and beg and beg for it. And sometimes I got them, obviously I did have collections of them. Sometimes I didn't, we were fucking poor. But they were things that other people, when other kids came into my room, they'd be like, whoa, why do you have this? Because you walked into my bedroom, the wall on the right was 4 shelves that were just, the entire wall was just VHS tapes. And then all the way above, at the top was a shelf going around 3 of the walls that were just China dolls, and they were stuffed on there. They weren't nicely displayed. I had so many that they were absolutely shoved in there next to each other. They were displayed nicely to a point because I made my dad let me climb the ladder to put their dresses right and make their hair look cute. But there were just loads of them. It was cluttered to shit. And then there was a shelf at the end of my bed that had all of my bears on because I liked to make sure they were all in the right place and everything looked right before I went to sleep. And obviously that's not stuff that most children do. That's not stuff that most children care about. And I loved it. I really, really adored it. I loved collecting those things. And when we later on moved to a different country and I couldn't take that stuff with me, and my parents had me choosing 2 China dolls, 1 bear to take, 5 VHS tape. I didn't get 5 VHS tapes in the end. My mum got every VHS tape I had on a shitty burnt DVD and then put them all into one of those little cases and made me have that, and I hated it because I wanted my videotapes. But I was obsessed with those collections, and my parents were very aware of that and very aware that it was sort of out of the norm, and they just went with it and didn't do anything about it. And on the one hand, I am well, that's nice of them, teasing me about it like you did with my special interest or being mean about it. But also, it's the type of thing that, if I noticed my kid doing something out of the norm, I would probably look into why they're doing that just to make sure I'm supporting them appropriately, Another really big thing in my childhood was that because my oldest brother was autistic, sometimes we'd get invited to like sort of autism groups. I don't really know what they were for. I think they were maybe like just so that like autistic kids could play together and their families could chat and be like, oh, someone else exists going through the same things as me. I don't really know because I was like a young little kid because my brother's 8 and 9 years older than me, so I didn't get to go to them for very long because he'd aged out of it. But I looked forward to those like nothing else because we'd get to go to soft play centres and all of the kids there, like obviously there were some kids like me that weren't technically autistic or didn't have anything going on, but it was 90% disabled kids. And that was when I actually got to like interact with people and play with other kids. And it was, they're some of the only times that I remember getting to actually interact and socialise as a child without it going bad at any point. A lot of my social interactions as a kid would eventually end in me crying or someone else crying or just generally like it ended badly. And it was when we got to go to these soft play centres and it was just all the other like disabled or autistic kids that I just got to play with people and no one acted like I was weird, no one said anything that made me upset. Like it was just such a comfortable and nice space. And again, it's the kind of thing where I do think my mum probably should have noticed, hey, every interaction that my kid has with like the people in his school, the people that live on our street, like the other kids in the area, goes badly. But when we take her to all of the disabled kids and she hangs out with them, everything goes really well. But that's where I think that ableism like really, really affected that because it wasn't seen as like I'm integrating with the disabled kids. It wasn't seen as me being one of them. It was seen as me being like, I was such a nice, empathetic child that I was even nice to the disabled kids, And it's like, no, it's because I was fucking one of them, hon. And alongside that, with other things that my parents like knew were autistic traits because of my brother, I was an incredibly picky eater, and it was the bane of my fucking childhood. I absolutely dreaded sitting down for our family dinners because my mum would quite often just put stuff in the middle and we'd have to like take stuff. But it wasn't, I couldn't just take the bits that I wanted, I had to have a full meal. So I would have to have a bit of everything. And some bit of it was nearly always something I didn't like. And my mum, bless her, wasn't the best cook. So it's like, no, I don't want these like soggy ass flavourless fucking green beans or whatever, The way my family worked was that my brother often got separate meals completely because he's autistic and he needs the help. It's not his fault. And then I would sit there and I'd eat the bits that I wanted. I'd eat my meat, I'd eat the potatoes, I'd eat like, the bits that weren't grim. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm full up. And I'll be like, no, you're not. You haven't eaten your boiled cabbage. I'd be like, oh, I don't really want it, but we had to clear our plates. So I'd spend hours and hours and hours just sat at the dining table with my dad just being like, I'm not eating it though. Like I can't eat that. And there were times that my mum would be like, we're sitting here as a family and watching you until you eat that food. And I'd put it in my mouth and I'd gag and I'd be like almost throwing up and she'd like, stop being dramatic, stop playing. And it's like, why would, I mean, I guess kids do, but I wasn't pretending, like it genuinely made me feel really, really sick. I couldn't eat it. It was just like, the texture, the smell, the taste, everything about it was wrong. And it was just seen as me being picky and me being dramatic and not wanting to eat my vegetables when that wasn't the case. And it's the kind of thing that I think I would let off a little bit more if it weren't like, but you were making my brother a completely different meal because he was saying the exact same things that I'm saying about the food. But I think even that a lot of times wasn't seen as like me having the same thoughts or having the same opinions or having the same feelings. It was assumed that I'd just heard what my brother said and went, I'll say the same thing to try and get away with it and pretend to be disabled like him, when like I was just having these experiences and being an undiagnosed autistic kid and being like, I can't eat this food. And my final little point I want to make here, it's not really a point, is it? My final trait is that I very much did the thing of being like the mini professor, the little tiny adult, and then got a bit older and completely burnt out. So when I was a very young kid, my parents had like a sort of holistic therapies type of shop come business. Half of it was an actual shop where people just wander in and buy like books and crystals, and the other half of it was an area where my dad like did and taught like Reiki and hypnotherapy and various other things like that. And I, to a point, kind of thrives there. Like it also caused me a lot of bullying at school and like other kids thought I was really fucking weird. But the adults that came to it, like I interacted with them. I ended up having quite a lot of chats with them. The things that my parents were doing, that were things that like tied into like my special interest with Charmed and things like that. There was this like magical element to it that I was really into. So I have certificates in how to do like Reiki and Hopi ear candling and hypnotherapy and things like that because I was quite invested in it, and I would have been between the ages of like 7 and 11 maybe. And because I was so into it and I was so knowledgeable about it and everything, and people were coming in for lessons and to be taught about it, I was so massively seen as like a real like pillar of childhood genius or something in that like little circle of things. It was a bit weird, and especially because like I was sort of just a weird, spooky little kid, you know. I loved that kind of stuff. My dad was having me do like fucking ghost readings for people and like taking them on little ghost hunts and stuff because like my daughter's connected to the other side. And it's so bizarre to me now that like it's just that I was autistic, you know, like I came off a little bit like weird and uncanny or whatever to adults because I didn't quite act in the way that they expected a child to act. And rather than be like, maybe our kid's like autistic or something like the brother, my parents were like, she can see ghosts. It's one way to make money, I guess. But you know, like it was very much this. Like I felt like I was a bit of a genius. They treated me like I was a bit of a genius, and then I did pretty well in school as well without having to put any sort of effort in. I enjoyed reading. I read a lot, so I was at a really high reading level. And there was a point when I'd finished every book in my primary school library. I just didn't have anything else to read there. I just a lot of the things that were part of learning when I was in primary school were things that I genuinely enjoyed and things that had a lot of creativity to them and things like that. And as I aged up through the school system, that became less so, you know. It became more that I needed to study, I needed to like actually research things, I needed to actually learn stuff. And I didn't know how to do that because I'd never had to do it before, but they acted like, oh, you've been in school this long, go and figure it out. And I was like, no, I don't know how to research, I don't know how to study, you know? I've always just gone to my lessons and then like read whatever material I've been given and been able to get a B, you know? Like I was never like top of my class, I wasn't a genius, but I always managed to like do a little bit better than a pass. And then all of a sudden I was just about scraping a pass and I had to actually put effort in and actually try. And I was like, I don't even know how to do these things. I don't know how to learn. And everyone's just expecting me to have it figured out. So I managed to do pretty well in my GCSEs. I got like 9 plus like A star to C GCSEs. None of them were A stars, that's just what they called it. I got almost exclusively C's and I got B's and like RE and my English ones. Like I did fine, you know, it wasn't great, it really wasn't very good, but I passed everything. No, I didn't, I failed history and maybe drama too actually. But you know, like if I left out the bad parts, I looked like I'd done pretty decently. Went off to college and was like, what the fuck, you know? Like I was doing, the first time I went it was for a music BTEC and the second time I was going to do film studies, creative writing and English literature. And both times I got there and it was just so incredibly overwhelming. And I'll give that like all of like the sensory issues and like the general struggles that I have in regards to like actually getting up in the morning and getting there also played into it. But it was also just such a self-structured way of learning. And I didn't know how to self-structure. I didn't know how to do any of that kind of shit on my own. I'd never had to like put the effort in. I always just managed it. And all of a sudden I was fully like bottom of my class, not doing well, could not handle it. And I just dropped out. I just could not do it. You know, I've dropped out twice because my brain doesn't work in the way that it needs to for that situation. And I'll give that the colleges around me at least do have like things in place to accommodate and try to support autistic students, but I didn't know I was autistic at the time. So it was just this massive, massive burnout all of a sudden. Everyone around me was like, but you've always been so clever, you've always been so good. And I was like, I haven't though, like I just didn't have to try for a long time. And then once I did have to try, I didn't know how the fuck I was meant to try. I didn't know what to try, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't study, I couldn't research, like I had no fucking idea. It just didn't process. So I think like where I was getting my validation for being a gifted kid and stuff was perhaps from a slightly different place than a lot of people. But I did also have like, you know, like my brothers would be outside playing and I'd be sat at the table with the adults, with like my mum's grown up friends or the adults in the family, just like having a little chat and stuff. Like I was seen as being like very mature for my age and very grown up and treated as an adult long before I should have been really. But I feel like that's a very consistent experience that a lot of autistic people have had, and especially late diagnosed autistic people. So I did want to throw that in at the end, even though it feels like a slightly like different genre of things to the others. I think a lot of the time it's just stuff like that where like, because so many of us feel like a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of like, what if it's wrong, what if I'm not autistic, what if it's this, what if it's that, what if this, and it can be quite validating and comforting to be able to look back and be like, oh no, like the hints were always there, the traits were always there, that's always been who I am. Often makes me feel better. I also do try not to reflect on my childhood all that often though, because it was a bit grim. But yeah, that's the video. That's all I had to say for this one. With the move and just how like stressed I've been and definitely having like a bit of burnout and just not feeling so great, I am struggling a bit for like content ideas. So honestly, if anyone wants to leave one in the comments, I'd take it. I did have screenshots at one point of a bunch of things that people had like not necessarily requested I talked about, but suggested that I could, and I fucking lost them. So if you've ever commented any suggestion that I haven't done, please leave it again. But yeah, that's the end of the video. So if you liked this, please do remember to like and subscribe as always. You can also follow me over on TikTok and Instagram, but my posting over there has been like even worse than it has been here, so I wouldn't honestly bother too hard at the minute. If you want to contribute to me financially, you can also follow me over on Patreon or Ko-fi. I never like asking, I never enjoyed it, it always feels a bit awkward and rude, but they're there if you want to, there's no pressure, you don't have to. And yeah, that's that. So whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I will see you again in a couple of days.